He was the monster every server prayed they wouldn't get. Alistair Blackwood, a billionaire whose temper was more famous than his fortune. Staff at the Gilded Spoon would fake illnesses, drop trays, do anything to avoid his table. For years they tiptoed around the dragon, enduring his cold fury and impossible demands in terrified silence. They all knew the rules: never make eye contact, never speak unless spoken to, and never ever challenge him. Then a new waitress, Sophia Rossi, started her shift completely unaware of the legend. And when she looked the monster right in the eye and refused to break, she unknowingly lit a fuse that would expose a secret so devastating it would change everything. The Gilded Spoon wasn't just a restaurant, it was a theatre. Every night a performance of wealth and status played out under the warm glow of crystal chandeliers. Its patrons were the city's elite old money scions, tech moguls, and the politicians who courted them. Its staff were seasoned professionals, trained to be unobtrusive ghosts who anticipated every need before it was voiced. They moved with a synchronized, silent grace, their faces placid masks of impeccable service. But on Tuesday evenings, a different kind of performance took place, a one-man show of intimidation, and the entire staff became its unwilling, trembling audience. Tuesday was Mr. Blackwood's night. Alistair Blackwood. The name was spoken in hushed tones in the kitchen, a verbal curse that seemed to cool the air. He was a titan of industry, a man who had built a global logistics empire from the ground up. His face, etched with severe lines and framed by steel-grey hair, often graced the covers of business magazines. But in the hushed, carpeted corridors of the Gilded Spoon, he wasn't a titan. He was a terror. Stories about him were the restaurant's own grim folklore. There was the tale of the sommelier he'd had fired on the spot for recommending a wine that was, in Blackwood's opinion, presumptuous. There was the young busboy who'd accidentally spilled a single drop of water on the tablecloth and was met with a glare so withering he'd quit mid-shift. The fear was primal. When his polished black Rolls-Royce would pull up to the curb, a wave of silent panic would ripple through the establishment. The host, Gregory, a man who'd once stared down a charging bull in Pamplona, would visibly pale. Senior waiters would suddenly find urgent tasks in the wine cellar. Junior staff would become intensely interested in polishing already gleaming silverware in the back. The unenviable task of serving him fell to whoever drew the short straw, a grim ritual overseen by the floor manager, Mr. Peterson. Into this den of carefully managed anxiety walked Sophia Rossi. Sophia was new. Not just to the Gilded Spoon, but to this level of dining. She was 24, with eyes the color of warm honey that held a fire of determination. Her life had been a series of hard knocks and sidesteps. She was working 2 jobs to put her younger sister Maya through community college, while also helping to manage the growing pile of medical bills for their mother, who was battling a chronic illness. For Sophia, this job wasn't about prestige, it was about survival. It paid better than any place she'd ever worked, and she was determined to excel to become one of those seamless professional ghosts. She'd spent her first week in a daze of learning, memorizing the dizzying wine list, the precise placement of 7 different forks, and the subtle social cues of the fabulously wealthy. She hadn't yet been indoctrinated into the cult of fear surrounding Alistair Blackwood. Her training had focused on menus and protocol, not the psychological profiles of problem patrons. On her second Tuesday, the short straw was metaphorically handed to her. The designated waiter for Blackwood's usual corner booth, a secluded alcove offering privacy and a panoramic view of the city, had called in sick with a sudden violent stomach flu that everyone knew was a diplomatic fiction. Mr. Peterson, his face tight with stress, scanned the floor. His eyes, desperate, landed on Sophia. She was polishing glasses behind the bar, her movements quick and efficient. "Rossi Peterson," said his voice, low and urgent. "You're up." "Up for what?" "Mr. Peterson," she asked, setting a crystal flute down with care. Table 7. Mr. Blackwood. The name meant nothing to her. "Okay. Any allergies or preferences I should know about?" A nervous laugh escaped a nearby waiter, which he quickly stifled into a cough when Peterson shot him a death glare. "Just be perfect," Peterson whispered, his eyes wide. "Don't make conversation. Don't offer suggestions unless he asks. Your name is Waitress. Your opinion is none. Do you understand? Be quick, be quiet, be gone." The intensity of the warning was strange, but Sophia simply nodded. She'd dealt with difficult customers before. How bad could one man be? She straightened her black apron, took a deep breath, and grabbed a leather-bound menu. As she approached table 7, she felt the ambient energy of the dining room shift. It was as if 100 conversations had simultaneously lowered in volume. The other servers moved with a new stilted caution, their eyes darting towards her, then away like frightened birds. She could feel their collective gaze on her back, a heavy cloak of shared dread. He was already seated, staring out the vast window at the glittering city below. He didn't look up as she approached. He was a man built on a large, imposing scale, his bespoke navy suit fitting his broad shoulders perfectly. A half-empty glass of what looked like scotch sat by his hand. "Good evening, Sir," Sophia said, her voice clear and steady. "Welcome to the Gilded Spoon. May I present you with the menu?" Alistair Blackwood turned his head slowly. His eyes, a startlingly pale, icy blue, scanned her from head to toe. It wasn't a leer. It was an appraisal, cold and dismissive, as if he were inspecting a piece of furniture for flaws. He said nothing. The silence stretched thick and uncomfortable. Sophia held his gaze, refusing to be the first to look away. She'd been taught that direct eye contact was a sign of confidence and sincerity. Peterson's warning echoed in her head, but instinct took over. Cowering felt like a form of dishonesty. Finally, with a soft grunt, he gestured curtly at the table. "Leave it." Sophia placed the menu down. "Can I get you another scotch while you decide?" He picked up his glass, swirled the amber liquid, and took a slow sip, his eyes never leaving hers. "You're new," he stated. It wasn't a question. "Yes, sir. My second week. They're letting novices handle this table now." He asked, a subtle, cutting disdain in his tone. Standards must be slipping. Sophia felt a flash of heat rise in her cheeks, but she suppressed it. She thought of her mother's prescription costs. She thought of Maya's tuition payment due next month. She could not afford to fail. "I'm fully trained on the menu, sir," she replied, her tone even and professional. "And I can assure you, the only thing slipping will be the butter on your complimentary bread roll should you desire one." The silence that followed was absolute. Sophia's heart hammered against her ribs. She thought she'd be fired on the spot. She could feel Peterson's horror from across the room without even looking. Out of the corner of her eye, she saw Brenda, a veteran waitress, press a hand to her mouth. Blackwood's severe face didn't change, but a flicker of something surprise annoyance passed through his cold eyes. He stared at her for a long moment, then let out another low grunt, this one sounding less like a dismissal and more like a reluctant acknowledgement. "Filet mignon. Medium rare. More rare than medium. If it comes out even a hint of pink in the center, I'm sending it back. The sauce on the side. Not drizzled, not in a little puddle next to it. In a separate bowl. And a bottle of the 82 Waitress." He didn't even glance at the wine list. He knew what he wanted. He knew it was one of the most expensive and rare bottles they had. It was a power move, a test, An excellent choice." Sir Sophia said, her voice betraying none of her inner turmoil. She wrote down the order, her hand steady. "I'll put that in immediately." She turned and walked away, her back straight, her steps measured. She didn't run. She didn't look relieved. She moved with the same professional grace as she had on her approach. As she passed the bar, Brenda grabbed her arm, her eyes wide, with a mixture of terror and awe. "Are you insane?" Brenda hissed. "You talked back to him." "Nobody talks back to him." "I didn't talk back," Sophia corrected quietly, pulling her arm free. "I did my job. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have to go and make sure the chef understands the concept of more rare than medium." She disappeared into the kitchen, leaving a trail of stunned silence in her wake. The staff of the Gilded Spoon had just witnessed the unthinkable. A new waitress had stood her ground against Alistair Blackwood. And for the first time in a very long time, no one knew what was going to happen next. The script had been thrown out, and the theatre of the Gilded Spoon had suddenly become very real. The kitchen was a pressure cooker of controlled chaos. But when Sophia pushed through the swinging doors, the usual clatter of pans and shouted orders seemed to momentarily hush. The head chef, Antoine, a temperamental genius who feared no man, except it seemed the one at table 7, looked up from plating a delicate sea bass. The order for Blackwood Sophia announced, handing him the slip. She leaned in closer. "Chef, he was very specific about the steak. He said, medium rare, but more rare than medium. He also said he'd send it back if it's even a hint of pink." Antoine snatched the paper, his brow furrowed. "More rare than medium, but not pink. Does he want me to cook it with a stern look?" "What is this nonsense? And the sauce a separate bowl completely detached from the plate," Sophia added. Antoine grumbled, running a hand through his flour-dusted hair. "This man. Every week a new psychological game. Fine. I will sear it for 45 seconds on each side and wave it in the general direction of the oven. If he complains, you tell him it was cooked with quantum mechanics." He then barked at a line cook, "Get the Petrus from the deep cellar and handle it like it's a newborn baby's heart." Sophia retreated from the kitchen's heat, her mission accomplished. But as she stepped back into the dining room, she found herself the epicenter of a storm of whispers. The other servers now looked at her differently. Before, she was the quiet new girl. Now she was a curiosity, a daredevil who had poked the dragon and somehow not been incinerated. Brenda intercepted her again, this time pulling her into the small, cramped staff locker room in the back. Mr. Peterson was there too, pacing the tiny space like a caged animal. He had loosened his tie, and a sheen of sweat glistened on his forehead. Rossi closed the door. Peterson commanded, his voice strained. Sophia did as she was told, the click of the latch sounding loud in the tense room. "What in God's name were you thinking?" Peterson began, stopping his pacing to face her. "I told you. Be quiet. Be invisible. The only thing slipping will be the butter on your complimentary bread roll. Are you trying to get fired?" He was being rude. "Mr. Peterson," Sophia said, her own defensiveness rising. "He implied I was incompetent and that your standards were dropping. I simply corrected him politely." Politely, Brenda cut in, her arms crossed. "Sophia, you don't understand. This isn't a normal customer. This is Alistair Blackwood. He doesn't operate on a normal human level. He doesn't do polite. He does power. He's a shark. You don't correct a shark. You just hope it doesn't bite you." Peterson sank onto a small bench, rubbing his temples. "Brenda's right. Let me give you the full picture since you seem to have missed the memo. 2 years ago, Blackwood came in. A young waiter, Thomas, a good kid, was serving him. Blackwood claimed his soup was cold. It wasn't. Thomas, trying to be helpful, said, "I can assure you, sir, it came right from the pot." A simple, innocent sentence. Peterson looked up, his eyes grave. Blackwood made one phone call. The next day, Thomas's father, a department manager at a mid-level supply company, was laid off. The company had just lost its biggest contract, a subsidiary of Blackwood Industries. We never proved it, of course. But we all knew. The man is vindictive. He is cruel. He has the power to ruin lives over a bowl of soup. Sophia felt a chill go down her spine. This was more than just a grumpy rich man. This was something darker, more malevolent. Why, Sophia asked, her voice barely a whisper. Why is he like that? Brenda sighed, her hardened expression softening for a moment. The story goes, it wasn't always this way. Years ago, he was different. Happily married, had a little girl. Then there was an accident. A drunk driver ran a red light, killed them both instantly, his wife Lillian and his daughter Olivia. She was only 6. The air in the small room grew heavy with the weight of the tragedy. Sophia thought of her own family, the fierce, protective love she felt for her mother and sister. The idea of losing them was a physical pain, a black hole that threatened to swallow her whole. The guy who did it, Brenda continued, her voice, Lowe had money-good lawyers. He got off with a slap on the wrist, community service, and a temporary license suspension. They said Blackwood changed after that. The man who went into that courthouse was never the man who came out. He became this. Hard, cold, and angry at the whole world, like he's trying to punish everyone for the injustice he suffered. So he comes here every week to, what, flex his misery on us? Sophia asked, a mix of pity and resentment churning within her. We think it's about control, Peterson said tiredly. He couldn't control the most important thing in his life. So now he controls everything else, down to the temperature of his soup and the exact shade of red in his steak. And we let him, because this restaurant needs his patronage. His weekly dinner, the functions he books here, they account for a significant portion of our revenue. So we walk on eggshells. We endure the humiliation. We cash the checks. That is the deal. He stood up and looked Sophia squarely in the eye. So I'm telling you this, not to scare you, though you should be scared. I'm telling you this as a warning. From now on, you do exactly as I said. No eye contact, no witty retorts. You are a machine. You deliver the food, you clear the plates, and you say nothing. Is that understood? Sophia nodded, but her mind was reeling. The story had changed things. He wasn't just a monster anymore. He was a man hollowed out by grief, lashing out from a place of unimaginable pain. It didn't excuse his behavior. The thought of what happened to Thomas the waiter made her stomach clench, but it complicated it. She left the locker room feeling like she was walking on a tightrope. On one side was her instinct for self-respect, her refusal to be treated like dirt. On the other was the very real, very frightening possibility of professional and personal ruin, not just for herself, but for her family who depended on her. When the impossibly expensive bottle of Petrus arrived from the cellar, cradled in a pristine white cloth, Sophia took it to his table. Her hands were trembling slightly as she presented the label to him. "The 1982 Petrus, sir," she said, her voice a carefully neutral monotone. He grunted his approval without looking at her. She expertly uncorked it, the soft pop echoing in the silent alcove. She poured a small amount into a glass for him to taste. He swirled it, sniffed it, and took a sip, holding the wine in his mouth for an unnervingly long time before swallowing. Acceptable, he finally declared. Sophia filled his glass to the proper level and was about to retreat when he spoke again, his voice low and sharp. "Waitress." She stopped her back to him. "Yes, sir." "Your name," he commanded. Her heart pounded. Peterson's words screamed in her head. Your name is Waitress. She was supposed to be anonymous, a ghost. Giving him her name felt like giving him a target. It felt like handing him a weapon. She squeezed her eyes shut for a fraction of a second, the faces of her mother and sister flashing in her mind. She turned around slowly to face him. Her own grief, her own struggles, her own fierce need to keep her family safe rose up to meet his cold, empty gaze. She would not cower. She would be professional, but she would not be a ghost. It's Sophia, sir, she said, her voice quiet but firm. Sophia Rossi. Alistair Blackwood stared at her, his expression unreadable. The icy blue of his eyes seeming to bore right through her. He gave a slow, deliberate nod, then turned his attention back to the window, dismissing her. As Sophia walked away, she felt a profound sense of dread. She had just broken the most important rule. She had given the shark her name, and now she could only wait for the bite. A week passed, a long, agonizing week where every ring of the phone made Sophia's stomach leap into her throat, expecting it to be Mr. Peterson, telling her not to come in. Every time her mother called to ask how the new job was, Sophia forced a bright, cheerful tone describing the chandeliers and the fancy food, omitting the part about the resident billionaire tyrant who might hold her family's fate in his hands. She was on edge, a taut wire of anxiety. The other staff treated her with a strange mix of pity and morbid curiosity, as if she were a lamb being led to a predictable slaughter. When Tuesday evening rolled around again, the atmosphere in the Gilded Spoon was thick enough to be carved with a fish knife. Sophia tried to busy herself with side tasks, hoping to be assigned to a different section anywhere else. But she knew it was a futile hope. At precisely 7:30 p.m., the Rolls-Royce glided to the curb. Gregory, the host, swallowed hard and approached Mr. Peterson. "He's here," Gregory announced, his voice funereal, and he had a request when he made the reservation. Peterson closed his eyes. "Don't tell me." He asked for the same table, Gregory continued, and the same waitress. He asked for Sophia Rossi by name. A collective silent gasp seemed to pass through the staff. This was it. This wasn't a coincidence. It was a summons, a deliberate, calculated move. Sophia felt her blood run cold. He hadn't forgotten her. He had fixated on her. Peterson walked over to Sophia, his face a mask of grim resignation. "It's you, Rossi. He asked for you. Remember what we talked about. Be a machine. No more clever remarks. Just do your job and get out." Nodding numbly, Sophia smoothed her apron with clammy hands. This felt different from last time. Last time was an accident. This was an appointment. As she walked towards table 7, she felt like she was walking a green mile. The whispers of her colleagues were gone, replaced by an unnerving, watchful silence. Blackwood was already seated, a glass of water in front of him, which was unusual. He typically started with scotch. He watched her approach, his pale eyes tracking her every step. "Good evening, Mr. Blackwood," Sophia said, her voice impressively steady despite the frantic beating of her heart. She placed the menu on the table. "Rossi," he acknowledged, his tone flat. He didn't look at the menu. "I'll start with the seared scallops, but I want them seared for precisely 1 minute on each side. Use a stopwatch if you must. They are to be served on a bed of wilted spinach, but the spinach must not touch the scallops. A clear demarcation." Sophia meticulously wrote it down. "Yes, sir. And for your main course, I was considering the duck confit," he said, tapping a long finger on the table. "But I find the cherry sauce you serve it with to be pedestrian. Tell the chef I want an orange and star anise reduction instead. It should be tart, not sweet. If I taste more than a hint of sugar, it will be sent back." This was a direct challenge to Chef Antoine's authority and his menu. It was designed to be difficult to cause friction in the kitchen, to see if she would push back or relay the insulting demand. An orange and star anise reduction. Tart not sweet. Understood, Sophia said, calmly making a note. And to drink water, he said. From a bottle, unopened. And I'll require 3 lemon wedges, not 2, not 4. 3. And a separate glass filled with ice. I will mix it myself. Every request was a small assertion of power, a deliberate complication of a simple process. It was a labyrinth of pointless specifications designed to make her trip up, to make her fail. Sophia met his gaze, held it for a beat, and then gave a slight professional nod. Of course, sir. I'll see to it immediately. She returned to the kitchen and relayed the orders. Antoine flew into a theatrical rage. Orange and star anise. Does he think this is a short-order diner? Does he want me to invent a new dish for him on the spot? And the scallops, a demarcation. Does he want me to build a little fence between them? He's testing me, Chef Sophia said quietly, her voice cutting through his tirade. Which means he's testing you. Please just do it. Perfectly. Antoine stared at her, then at the order slip. He let out a long, frustrated sigh. Fine. For you, Sophia. We will do it. We will build him his fence of spinach. The first test came with the water. Sophia returned with a chilled bottle of San Pellegrino, a bucket of ice, a highball glass filled with perfectly clear ice cubes, and a small plate bearing exactly 3 uniformly cut lemon wedges. She opened the bottle in front of him, placed everything on the table within his reach, and retreated without a word. He watched her a hawk observing its prey, but found no fault. Next, the scallops. When the plate came up from the kitchen, it was a work of art. The 3 large scallops were seared to a perfect golden brown. They sat on one side of the plate. On the other, a neat mound of vibrant green spinach wilted just so. A literal gap of white porcelain, a demarcation, separated them. Sophia carried it to the table with the steadiness of a surgeon. She placed it before him. Your seared scallops, sir. Blackwood stared down at the plate for a long time. He picked up his fork and nudged one of the scallops, checking its underside. He then took a small bite of the spinach. He chewed slowly, deliberately, his face an unreadable slate. He then cut a small piece from the scallop and ate it. Sophia stood perfectly still, holding her breath. He said nothing. He simply finished the scallops and the spinach, leaving the plate clean. It was neither a compliment nor a complaint. It was a void. The main course was the true crucible. The duck confit arrived, the skin impossibly crisp, and beside it, in a small silver sauce boat, was a dark, glistening reduction. Sophia placed it down. The duck confit with the orange and star anise reduction you requested. Blackwood picked up the sauce boat and poured a small amount onto the side of his plate. He dipped the tip of his fork in just a tiny drop and brought it to his lips. He closed his eyes. Sophia could see the muscles in his jaw working. The entire dining room seemed to be holding its breath with her. He opened his eyes and looked at the sauce, then at Sophia. It's adequate. From Alistair Blackwood, adequate was the highest form of praise. A wave of relief so profound washed over Sophia that she felt lightheaded. He proceeded to eat the entire meal meticulously, saucing each bite himself. He declined dessert, but ordered a coffee. Black, he commanded. And I want it brewed fresh. I don't want coffee that has been sitting on a burner. Sophia brought him a steaming cup brewed just moments before. He took a sip and set it down. The meal was over. The test, it seemed, was complete. The check, he said. His voice clipped. Sophia processed the bill and brought it back in the leather folio. He placed a black credit card inside without looking at the total. She took it, ran the transaction, and brought back the slip for him to sign. He scrawled an unreadable signature, stood up, and walked towards the exit without a backward glance. Sophia waited until he was gone before she dared to pick up the folio. Her hands were shaking now that the adrenaline was beginning to fade. She opened it to retrieve the restaurant's copy of the slip. She glanced at the tip line. Her breath hitched. The bill was for several $1,000s, mostly due to the previous week's wine. On the tip line, where he usually left a standard, almost insultingly precise 20%, he had written in a new number. It was an amount nearly equal to the cost of the meal itself. It was more money than she made in 2 weeks. Beneath the signature, he had added 2 small, almost illegible words. For the trouble. Brenda and the other waiters rushed over, their curiosity finally boiling over. What happened? What did he do? Brenda asked, her eyes scanning Sophia as if looking for injuries. Sophia was speechless. She simply turned the slip around for them to see. There were gasps. I don't understand, whispered a young waiter named Paul. He never does that. Never. He left me a note once, Brenda said grimly. It said the salt shaker was insufficiently full. It made no sense. His behavior was deliberately antagonistic, designed to make her life hell. Yet the tip was extravagantly generous. It was a contradiction, a puzzle. He had put her through a gauntlet, tested her patience, her memory, her nerve, and her kitchen's skill. She had met every challenge with unflappable competence, and in his own strange transactional way, he had rewarded her for it. Sophia pocketed her copy of the slip, the large number, a stark, confusing reality. It wasn't a victory. It felt more like she had survived a battle, emerging not with a trophy, but with a question. Who was this man who paid so handsomely for the privilege of being difficult? The warning from her colleagues had been about a monster. But this was more complicated. This was a man who, for some unknowable reason, was testing the world around him and was willing to pay a premium for those who didn't break. The dread she had felt earlier was now replaced by a deep, unsettling curiosity. The massive tip became the new leading story in the folklore of the Gilded Spoon. Sophia was no longer the lamb for the slaughter. She was the dragon tamer. Her colleagues now treated her with a newfound respect tinged with awe. Mr. Peterson stopped looking at her with pity and started looking at her with a kind of baffled admiration. The victory, however, felt hollow to Sophia. The money was a godsend, immediately earmarked for a large chunk of her mother's overdue medical expenses, but the encounter had left her more unsettled than triumphant. It was like being praised by a storm for not being blown over. A new routine began to form. Every Tuesday, Alistair Blackwood would arrive at 7:30 p.m. He would ask for Sophia's section, and every week he would present a new series of bizarre and demanding tests. One week he insisted his water glass be replaced every time it was half empty. Another, he complained that the faint scent of lilies from the lobby's floral arrangement was interfering with the bouquet of his wine, forcing a flustered Gregory to have the entire massive vase removed. He sent back a lamb chop, claiming it was plated at an unappealing angle. Sophia met every challenge with the same stoic professionalism. She became an expert in anticipating his moods in deciphering his cryptic complaints. She learned that the lighting is too aggressive meant he wanted the dimmer lowered by an almost imperceptible 5%. The ambient noise is distracting meant a family with loud children at the far end of the restaurant was bothering him. She handled each request without flinching a calm center in the whirlwind of his discontent. Their interactions remained clipped and formal. He called her Rossi. She called him Mr. Blackwood. He never smiled. He rarely made eye contact, but he always, at the end of the meal, left a tip that was wildly, almost absurdly generous. It became their unspoken contract. He would test her resilience, and she would monetize his misery. She was his designated lightning rod. The rest of the staff was spared his wrath, which now seemed to be focused entirely on her. They were grateful, and Sophia found a strange satisfaction in her role as the restaurant's shield. The money was life-changing. She was finally ahead of the bills. She'd bought her sister a new laptop for her college classes and had started a small savings account for her mother's future care. One Tuesday evening in late autumn, the restaurant was quieter than usual. A chill rain was streaking down the large windows, blurring the city lights into a watercolor painting. Blackwood was particularly silent, staring into the rain with a deep, brooding intensity. Sophia served him his usual filet mignon, cooked to his exacting specifications, and retreated to a discreet distance. Her phone vibrated in her apron pocket. It was her sister Maya. Sophia knew she shouldn't take personal calls during her shift, but a spike of anxiety shot through her. Maya rarely called her at work. Excusing herself to the relative privacy of a small alcove near the staff entrance, she answered her voice, a hushed whisper. "Maya, is everything okay? Is it Mom? She's okay, Fia." "She's fine." Maya's voice came through thick with emotion. "I mean, she's the same. That's the problem." Sophia heard her sister take a shaky breath. "I just got the estimate from the specialist. The new treatment they're recommending. Fia, we can't afford it. It's more than you make in a year. The insurance is calling it experimental and won't cover it." Sophia's heart sank. She leaned against the wall, the cool plaster a stark contrast to the heat of panic rising in her chest. "How much, Maya?" $40,000, Maya whispered, her voice cracking. "And that's just for the first round. Fia, what are we going to do? Mom is so hopeful about this. It's the first time I've seen her excited about anything in months." Sophia squeezed her eyes shut, fighting back tears. She felt the weight of her family's hopes, their fears, their future, pressing down on her. The tips from Blackwood, as generous as they were a drop in the ocean compared to this. "Don't worry," Sophia said, forcing a strength she didn't feel into her voice. "We'll figure it out. We always do. I can pick up more shifts. Maybe I can take out a loan." The word sounded flimsy, even to her own ears. "A loan, Fia. Your credit is already stretched thin from her last surgery. Please don't ruin your future for this." "You and Mom are my future, Maya Sophia," said fiercely, her voice trembling with a mix of love and desperation. "I'll figure it out, I promise. Just don't tell Mom about the cost. Not yet. Let her have that hope for a little while." They said their goodbyes, and Sophia hung up her hand, shaking. She took a deep, shuddering breath, trying to compose herself before stepping back into the dining room. She had to be the calm, unflappable waitress. She couldn't afford to be the terrified daughter who was in over her head. She wiped a stray tear from her cheek and turned to leave the alcove, and froze. Alistair Blackwood was standing not 20 feet away, near the entrance to the restrooms. He wasn't looking at her, but she knew with a sudden gut-wrenching certainty that he had been there for the entire call. His back was to her, but his posture was rigid. He had heard everything: the hushed desperation, the cracking voice, the impossible number $40,000. Embarrassment and fear washed over her in a sickening wave. She had exposed her vulnerability, her desperation, to the one man who seemed to take pleasure in a world of perfect, emotionless control. She expected a reprimand, a sharp comment about conducting personal business on company time. He did nothing. He simply turned and walked back to his table as if he hadn't seen or heard a thing. The rest of the evening passed in a blur of nerve-wracking tension for Sophia. He was even more silent than before. He finished his meal, paid the check with another enormous tip, and left without a word. Sophia cleaned his table, her mind racing. Had he heard? What would he do with that information? Would he use it against her somehow? The thought was terrifying. 2 days later, Sophia was at home on her day off, sorting through a mountain of medical paperwork, when she received a phone call from an unknown number with a prestigious downtown area code. "May I speak with Sophia Rossi?" a crisp, professional female voice asked. "This is she," Sophia answered cautiously. "Ms. Rossi, my name is Catherine Pierce. I'm a senior partner at the law firm of Pierce, Davies and Grant. I'm calling you regarding your mother's medical case." Sophia was bewildered. I'm sorry, I haven't contacted any law firm." "I know," Catherine Pierce said, her voice kind. "We were contacted by a third party, a benefactor who wishes to remain anonymous. This person has made us aware of your family's situation, specifically the denial of insurance coverage for a recommended treatment. Our firm specializes in challenging such denials, and in some cases exploring medical malpractice if initial care was substandard. The benefactor has arranged and paid for a full consultation for you and a complete review of your mother's case. Pro bono, of course. For you." Sophia sank into a chair, her head spinning. "A benefactor, who why?" "As I said, the party wishes to remain strictly anonymous," the lawyer replied smoothly. "Their only instruction was to provide you with the best possible legal assistance. We are very good at what we do, Miss Rossi. Can I schedule you for an appointment tomorrow morning?" Dumbfounded. Sophia agreed. She hung up the phone, her mind a whirlwind of confusion. An anonymous benefactor. A top-tier law firm. It made no sense. Who would do such a thing? The following Tuesday, Sophia approached Blackwood's table with a new sense of trepidation. She was armed with a secret she wasn't sure how to handle. She'd met with Catherine Pierce, a brilliant and compassionate lawyer, who, after a preliminary review, believed they had a very strong case against the insurance company, and possibly even a malpractice claim against one of her mother's previous doctors that they'd never even considered. A door had opened where there had only been a solid wall. She served Blackwood his meal with her usual quiet efficiency. As she was pouring his coffee at the end of the meal, her hands were steady, but her mind was screaming. Was it him? Could it possibly be him? It seemed insane. The cruel, demanding tyrant playing the part of a secret angel. As he was preparing to leave, she cleared his dessert plate. He paused, looking not at her, but at a point just past her shoulder. "In this world, Rossi," he said, his voice a low rumble. Completely out of the blue, the system is designed to crush the little guy. The paperwork is confusing for a reason. The rules are incomprehensible for a reason. He finally lifted his gaze to meet hers. His icy blue eyes held a depth she had never seen before. "When someone offers you good advice," he continued, his voice deliberate, "you'd be a fool not to take it." And with that, he stood, dropped his napkin on the table, and walked out of the restaurant, leaving Sophia standing in his wake, her heart hammering against her ribs. It was him. There was no other explanation. The timing, the comment. Alistair Blackwood, the monster of the gilded spoon, the man who ruined lives over cold soup, had just given her family a lifeline. The glimmer of humanity she had just witnessed wasn't a glimmer. It was a blinding flash of light, illuminating the dark complex and utterly baffling mystery of the man at table 7. The revelation that Alistair Blackwood was her anonymous benefactor shattered Sophia's perception of him. The cruel, demanding tyrant was also a secret angel of mercy. The contradiction was too profound to ignore. Consumed by a need to understand the man behind the mask, Sophia dedicated her off hours to a new mission, uncovering the real Alistair Blackwood. Her investigation began at her small kitchen table, the glow of her sister's laptop her only light. The initial search results yielded the familiar public narrative glowing profiles in business journals celebrating his ruthless acumen, followed by invasive tabloid stories that painted him as a bitter, reclusive figure haunted by his past. They all told the same superficial story of a man turned to stone by grief. Sophia knew there was more. She dug deeper, pushing past the first 10 pages of search results, using more specific keywords like victims' rights and pro bono terms she'd learned from her meeting with Catherine Pierce. Her breakthrough came from an obscure legal blog post from over a decade ago. It lamented the legislative failure of a proposed bill called the Olivia Lillian Bill, which aimed to introduce harsher sentences for drunk drivers. The names were a punch to the gut, his daughter and his wife. The article mentioned in passing that the small advocacy group behind the bill had been quietly funded by an anonymous donor. This clue was the key. Using the advocacy group's name, Sophia unlocked a hidden history. A pattern emerged, a trail of breadcrumbs leading through years of quiet, unpublicized philanthropy. She found records of a massive grant to a non-profit that provided free legal counsel to families fighting powerful insurance companies. She discovered an endowed scholarship at a university for aspiring public defenders. In every case, the funding came from a mysterious, anonymous source. It was all him. Sophia leaned back, stunned. Blackwood wasn't just a man lashing out at the world. He was waging a secret one-man war against the very brand of systemic injustice that had shattered his own life. His obsession with control at the restaurant suddenly made perfect, tragic sense. It wasn't the petulance of a rich man. It was a profound trauma response. Having lost control over the most important moment of his life, he coped by micromanaging the one tiny corner of the world he could, his dinner. The temperature of his soup, the angle of his lamb chop, they were desperate attempts to impose order on a universe that had shown him only chaos. His rudeness was a fortress built to keep people at a distance, ensuring he could never lose anyone again. The final piece of the puzzle clicked into place when she found an old society column from before the accident. It featured a photo of a much younger, smiling Alistair Blackwood at a charity gala. His wife Lillian was radiant on his arm, and holding his hand was a little girl with a missing front tooth, Olivia. The caption noted their support for a children's literacy program. He hadn't always been a monster. He had been a husband, a father, a happy man. Seeing that photo, Sophia felt an ache of sympathy that eclipsed all her previous fear. Armed with this devastating, humanizing truth, Sophia knew her next encounter with him couldn't be the same. She had to acknowledge the man he truly was, not the character he played. That Tuesday she approached his table with a newfound sense of purpose. He began his typical litany of difficult requests, but Sophia heard them differently now, not as malice, but as a scripted ritual of pain. When she brought him his custom-blended tea, she waited for a lull in the dining room's chatter. "Mr. Blackwood," she began, her voice soft but clear, causing him to look up in surprise at this break in their protocol. "I was doing some reading the other day about legal advocacy groups, the ones that help families fight for victims' rights." A deep stillness came over him. His hands, which had been resting on the table, froze. He was listening intently. "I was just so struck by it," Sophia continued, holding his gaze. "The idea that there are people out there, working behind the scenes, fighting for strangers they've never even met. They don't do it for recognition. They just see an injustice, and try to make it right. She paused, letting the weight of her words settle in the air between them. I just think it's an amazing thing what some people do to fight for others, especially when no one is watching. The silence that followed was profound, filled with unspoken meaning. The fortress around Alistair Blackwood showed a crack. For the first time, he wasn't appraising her or testing her. He was truly seeing her. He saw the person who had looked past his monstrous facade and acknowledged the wounded man behind it. He cleared his throat, a rough, gravelly sound, and picked up his menu, though he didn't read it. The scallops, he said, his voice softer than she had ever heard it. I think I'll have the seared scallops tonight. Exactly as the chef prepares them. It was a concession, a white flag. The tests were over. Sophia simply nodded, a small, knowing smile on her lips. She had found the truth, and by sharing it so subtly, she had opened the door for the real Alistair Blackwood to walk through. The truce declared over the scallops marked a profound shift. Alistair Blackwood's weekly visits transformed from tense trials into quiet, respectful rituals. The bizarre, exacting demands ceased. He began asking Sophia's opinion on wine pairings, and to the astonishment of the staff would actually take her recommendation. Their dynamic had settled into a comfortable peace, humming with the unspoken knowledge of his secret kindness. The true turning point came when Catherine Pierce's law firm secured a life-altering victory against the insurance company. With her mother's future care guaranteed, Sophia felt an overwhelming gratitude that she could no longer contain. That Tuesday evening, as the restaurant began to empty, she knew she had to break their silent pact. She approached his table with purpose. "Mr. Blackwood," she began, her voice steady. He looked up from the window, a flicker of understanding in his pale eyes. "Sophia, I suspect you have more to say than asking if I'd like a refill." "I do," she said, taking a breath. "I know it was you." He didn't feign ignorance. "Your lawyer is very good. I trust the outcome was satisfactory." "It changed my family's life," she replied, her voice thick with emotion. "You gave my mother a future. I don't have the words to thank you." "No thanks are necessary," he said quietly. "The system failed you. I simply provided a tool to level the playing field." "It's more than that," she insisted gently. "I did some research. The Olivia, Lillian, Bill, the scholarships, the other families. I know the monster everyone fears is just a mask." A shadow of his old pain crossed his face. "That reputation keeps the world at arm's length. After I lost my family, the world became noise. Controlling things here was the only way to make it stop, a pathetic substitute for the control I'd lost. I see the man who endured that," Sophia replied, her voice soft with empathy. "And the same man saved my mother." For the first time, a genuine, if small, smile touched Alistair's lips. "You were the first person in a decade who wasn't afraid. You didn't see a monster. You saw a rude customer and stood your ground." He paused, his expression turning serious. "I have a proposition. All those anonymous charities need someone to run them. Someone with integrity and courage. I'm establishing the Blackwood Foundation, and I want you to be its executive director." Sophia was stunned into silence. He was offering her a new life, a path she had never dreamed of, a chance to help others, just as she had been helped. She looked around the elegant dining room, the stage for her fear and her triumph, and knew her time here was over. "Yes," she said, her voice clear and certain. "I accept." It was not a fairy tale ending, but a new beginning. He was taking a first step out of the shadows, and she was starting a career she couldn't have imagined. The waitress who refused to back down hadn't just earned his respect. She had given him a reason to re-engage with the world. The story of Sophia and Alistair isn't just about a waitress and a billionaire. It's a powerful reminder that the people we dismiss as monsters are often just individuals fighting battles we know nothing about. It shows that courage isn't about the absence of fear, but about standing firm in spite of it. One act of defiance, one refusal to be diminished, set in motion a chain of events that uncovered a hidden truth and healed two very different lives. Their journey teaches us that empathy is a superpower, and that looking past the surface to truly see the person within can change not only their world, but also our own. If this story of unexpected connection and hidden kindness moved you, please give this video a like and share it with someone who might need to hear it. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more real-life stories that challenge our perceptions and warm our hearts. Your support helps us continue to find and tell these incredible tales. What do you do when your life is a constant battle for survival? For 25-year-old Aurora Templeton, it meant smiling through gritted teeth as she served coffee to the city's elite, all while her dreams gathered dust. But one customer was different. Carter Ellison, a man whose wealth was matched only by his cruelty. His words were daggers, his gaze a judgment. Every shift he worked was a masterclass in humiliation. What she didn't know was that this man, this monster, who seemed determined to break her spirit, was bound to her by a secret forged in love and sealed by tragedy a quarter of a century ago. This isn't just a story about a waitress and a millionaire. It's about a wound that never healed, a truth that was buried, and the collision of two worlds that will either destroy them both or uncover the unbelievable identity of her real father. The scent of overbrewed coffee lemon polish and simmering desperation was the official perfume of the Gilded Spoon. It was a place that pretended to be more than it was, a mid-tier bistro with 5-star aspirations, and a clientele who believed their bank balance entitled them to behave like feudal lords. For Aurora Templeton, it was simply the place that kept the lights on in her tiny, drafty apartment and paid for the art supplies she rarely had the energy to use. At 25, Bella felt older than her years. The light in her hazel eyes, a reflection of the vibrant, hopeful girl she used to be, was often dimmed by exhaustion. Her mother, Sophia, had passed away 6 months ago after a brutal fight with cancer, taking with her the warmth and the small, fragile sense of security that had defined Bella's world. Now she was truly alone, armed only with a mountain of medical debt, a half-finished graphic design portfolio, and a resilience that was being tested daily. Her best friend and fellow waiter, Liam, slid a glass of water onto the service counter. "You've got table 7, he said, his voice low. "Brace yourself. It's him." Bella didn't need to ask who him was. Carter Ellison. The name alone was enough to make the staff's shoulders tense. He was a titan of industry, the CEO of Ellison Global Holdings, a man whose picture was frequently in the Financial Times, but whose personality was best captured in a horror novel. He came into the Gilded Spoon twice a week for lunch, not because he liked the food. He made it painfully clear he did not, but because it was conveniently located. And as Liam theorized, he enjoyed having a fresh audience for his particular brand of casual cruelty. "Joy," Bella muttered, tying her apron tighter, as if it were a suit of armor. She plastered on her professional smile, the one that didn't quite reach her eyes, and picked up a menu. Carter Ellison sat alone, his back ramrod straight, his custom-tailored suit probably costing more than Bella's entire yearly income. He wasn't looking at the menu. He was staring out the window, his face a mask of stern impatience. He was handsome in a severe, sculpted way, with sharp cheekbones, piercing blue eyes, and silver-streaked dark hair, but there was no softness in his features, only a chilling authority. "Good afternoon, sir. Welcome to the Gilded Spoon. Can I get you started with something to drink?" Bella asked, her voice even and polite. He didn't look at her. His gaze remained fixed outside. "Sparkling water, Italian, with a single perfectly spherical ice cube and a wedge of lime, not lemon. The lime must be freshly cut. I can taste the difference if it's been sitting out." His voice was a low baritone, crisp and devoid of any warmth. "Of course, sir," Bella said, making a mental note of the needlessly complex order. It was his signature move, an immediate test of competence and subservience. She returned moments later with the water prepared exactly as he'd requested. She had personally selected the lime and sliced it herself. She placed it on the table with a steady hand. He finally turned his head, his cold blue eyes sweeping over her for the first time. It was a dismissive glance, the kind one gives to a piece of furniture that is slightly out of place. He picked up the glass, swirled it, and took a small sip. "Passable," he conceded, setting the glass down with a definitive click. The menu. "It's right here, sir," Bella said, gesturing to the menu she had already placed on the table. He gave a long-suffering sigh, as if her very existence was an inconvenience. "I know where it is. I am telling you to present it to me." It was a power play, pure and simple. Bella held her ground, her smile tightening. "Our special today is a pan-seared salmon with an asparagus risotto and a dill cream sauce." "I don't care about your special," he sneered, finally picking up the menu. He scanned it for less than 10 seconds before snapping it shut. "The steak, medium rare." And when I say medium rare, I don't mean the chef's interpretation of it. I mean a warm red center. If it comes out even a shade towards medium, I will send it back. The fries should be crispy, not limp with oil. And I want the seasonal vegetables, but hold the carrots. I detest carrots. Steak medium rare, crispy fries, seasonal vegetables, no carrots. Excellent choice, sir. Bella said the words tasting like ash in her mouth. She retreated to the pause system, her hands trembling slightly as she punched in the order. Liam came up behind her. "He's in rare form today. Did he ask you to personally pluck the chicken?" "Yet." "Close." Bella sighed, leaning against the counter. "He specified the geometry of his ice cube." Liam shook his head. "The man's a sociopath in a suit. Don't let him get to you." "I'm trying," she whispered. "But some days, it just feels personal. Like he looks at me and sees everything he despises. He looks at everyone like that, Bella. It's not you. It's him." But Liam was wrong. It did feel personal. It was the way his eyes, the color of a winter sky, seemed to look straight through her, dismissing her entire being as worthless. It dredged up old insecurities, the feeling of not being good enough that had haunted her since childhood, a ghost she could never quite shake. Her mother had always been there to banish those ghosts, to tell her she was smart and talented and worthy. Without Sophia, the ghosts felt more real, and Carter Ellison was their king. The food was ready. Bella personally inspected the steak, pressing the center lightly. It felt right. The fries were golden brown, the vegetables glistened. She carried the heavy plate to his table. "Your steak, sir," she announced, placing it before him. He didn't thank her. He picked up his knife and fork and sliced precisely into the center of the meat. He leaned in, inspecting it like a jeweler examining a flawed diamond. He took a single bite, chewed slowly, his expression unreadable. Bella held her breath. "It's acceptable," he finally declared. He then picked up a green bean from his plate, with his fingers held it up and looked at her. "This is overcooked. Its structural integrity has been compromised." Bella stared at the green bean, then back at his dead serious face. For a moment, she thought it was a joke, a bizarre attempt at humor, but his eyes were cold expectant. He was serious. "I am so sorry about that, sir," she said, her training kicking in. "Would you like me to bring you a new side of vegetables?" "Don't be ridiculous. The moment has passed," he said, waving a dismissive hand. "Just ensure it doesn't happen again. One expects a certain standard, even in a place like this." He ate the rest of his meal in silence, never once looking up. Bella avoided the table, sending Liam to refill his water. The sheer arrogance of the man radiated from him like a toxic aura, poisoning the air around him. When he was finally finished, he stacked his plates neatly a sign she knew that he was ready for the check. She dropped it off without a word. He placed a black credit card on top. When she brought back the slip for him to sign, he took his time, his expensive fountain pen scratching against the paper. He pushed it to the edge of the table and stood up, adjusting his suit jacket. He walked out of the restaurant without a backward glance. Bella walked over to the table, a sense of dread washing over her. His tips were notoriously insulting. $1 sometimes just loose change. It was another way to remind them of their station. She picked up the slip. The total was $87.50. On the tip line, he had written a single bold number 0, and below it, in sharp, angular handwriting, were 4 words. "Try a little harder." The ink seemed to burn on the page. It wasn't just a 0 tip. It was a personal critique, a calculated blow. All her effort, her patience, her swallowing of pride for nothing, for a slap in the face. A hot tear of fury and humiliation pricked her eye. She quickly wiped it away, crumbling the receipt in her fist. "Don't look," Liam said softly, coming to clear the plates. "Just throw it away. He's not worth the paper he writes on." Bella unclenched her fist and smoothed out the paper. She stared at the sharp, elegant handwriting, the cruel words. "One day," she whispered to herself, a vow forming in the broken parts of her heart, "I'll be somewhere he can't reach me. I'll be someone he can't dismiss." She didn't know then how prophetic those words would be, or how spectacularly, terribly wrong she was. Carter Ellison was already closer to her than she could ever imagine. The encounters with Carter Ellison became a grim ritual. Every Tuesday and Thursday, he would appear a storm cloud in a bespoke suit, and the air in the Gilded Spoon would grow heavy. He never varied his order, but he always found a new flaw. The soup was a degree too tepid. The bread wasn't crusty enough. The music was distracting. Each complaint was delivered with the same detached superiority, a surgeon dissecting a cadaver. Bella learned to cope by dissociating. She became a machine, a polite automaton that delivered food and absorbed insults without reaction. But behind the professional veneer, a slow-burning anger was solidifying into something harder, something that felt dangerously like hatred. One rainy Thursday, he was particularly vile. The restaurant was busy and the kitchen was backed up. His steak took 3 minutes longer than usual. "Is the cow being slaughtered to order?" he'd asked flatly when she apologized for the delay. When the food arrived, he claimed the fries were cold, though steam was visibly rising from them. He sent them back. When the fresh batch came, he ate 2 and left the rest, declaring his appetite ruined. He left no tip, but this time the note on the receipt read, "Perhaps a career requiring less precision would be more suitable." That night, Bella walked home in the drizzle, the cruel words echoing in her head. They stung more than the others, because they hit her where she was most vulnerable, her stalled ambition. Her dream of being a graphic designer felt more distant than ever. She spent her days serving people like Ellison, and her nights too exhausted to even open her sketchbook. His words weren't just an insult. They felt like a verdict on her life. She let herself into her small apartment, the one she and her mother had shared. It still smelled faintly of Sophia's favorite lavender soap. Most of her mother's belongings had been sorted, given away to charity, or packed into storage. But one thing remained sitting on the dusty top shelf of the hall closet, a large, sturdy shoebox sealed with yellowing tape. Sophia had called it her box of ghosts. It contained mementos from her life before Bella, a life she rarely spoke of. Some things are best left in the past, tesoro mio, she would say, with a sad smile whenever a young Bella would ask about it. She'd made Bella promise not to open it until she was truly ready to understand. Bella hadn't known what that meant. After her mother died, she couldn't bring herself to touch it. The grief was too raw, but tonight was different. Ellison's relentless cruelty had hollowed her out, leaving her feeling disconnected from herself, from the person her mother had raised her to be. She needed a reminder of where she came from. She needed a piece of her mum. With a resolve she hadn't felt in months, she dragged a chair into the hall, climbed up and carefully lifted the box down. It was heavier than she expected. She sat on the floor, her heart pounding, a nervous rhythm against her ribs, and slit the tape with a kitchen knife. The scent of old paper and dried flowers wafted out. On top lay a stack of old vinyl records, mostly Italian crooners Sophia had loved. Beneath them, nestled in tissue paper, were the real treasures. First, a small velvet-covered journal. Bella opened it. It was her mother's diary from when she was in her early 20s, just after she'd arrived in America from Italy. The entries were full of hope, excitement, and the challenges of starting a new life. Then she saw the photographs, bundles of them tied with faded ribbon. There were pictures of a young, radiant Sophia, her dark hair long and wild, laughing on a beach, posing in front of city landmarks. She looked so carefree, so full of life. It hurt to see. In one bundle there was a man with her. He was young, probably the same age as Sophia, with an intense, ambitious look in his eyes. He wasn't conventionally handsome, but he was striking with a sharp jawline and deep-set eyes that seemed to burn with purpose. In some photos, he and Sophia were laughing arms around each other. In others, they looked at each other with an aching tenderness that leapt off the glossy paper. Bella's breath hitched. She felt a strange pang of something. Recognition she'd never seen this man before. Her mother had never mentioned a serious boyfriend from her past. Who was he? She kept digging. At the very bottom of the box, wrapped in a silk scarf, was a small, heavy object. It was a locket. Silver tarnished with age in the shape of a perfect circle. On the front, 2 initials were intricately engraved, entwined with each other, S and A. With trembling fingers, Bella pried it open. Inside were 2 tiny, perfectly preserved photographs. On one side was her mother, Sophia, looking impossibly young and in love. On the other side was the young man from the photographs. His expression in the tiny portrait was softer, a rare, small smile playing on his lips. Bella stared at the man's face, her mind racing. A, the initial on the locket. His name must have started with A. She looked closer at the face in the picture, at the sharp cheekbones, the intense eyes, the set of his jaw. A cold, horrifying familiarity began to creep up her spine. It was impossible. It had to be a coincidence, a cruel trick of the mind. She scrambled back to the pile of photographs, her hands shaking so badly she could barely hold them. She found the clearest photo of the young man's face and held it under the lamplight. She studied the shape of his eyes, his nose, the line of his mouth. Then she pulled out her phone and, with a sense of sickening dread, typed Carter Ellison Young into the search bar. The search results loaded. An old article from a business journal appeared titled Carter Ellison, the Making of a Mogul. It featured a black and white photo of him from 30 years ago, accepting some sort of entrepreneurial award. He was older than in her mother's photos, his hair shorter, a suit replacing the casual clothes. But it was him, unmistakably. The same piercing eyes, the same jawline, the same man. The phone slipped from her fingers and clattered to the floor. Bella stared at the locket in her palm. S&A, Sophia, and Carter. The air rushed out of her lungs. The room began to spin. Carter Ellison, the cruel, arrogant millionaire who treated her like dirt. The man whose casual insults had haunted her for months. The man she hated with every fiber of her being. She scrambled for the diary, her mind a chaotic storm of denial and horror. She flipped through the pages, her eyes scanning the neat, looping script for a name. And there it was. October 12th. Carter gave me a locket today. It's the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. He said the S&A stands for Sophia and Carter always. I feel like my heart could burst. He talks about his plans, his company, Ellison something or other. He says one day he'll be on top of the world, and he wants me there with him. I believe him. I would follow him anywhere. Bella's blood ran cold. It wasn't a coincidence. It was a fact, a terrible, world-shattering fact. This man, her personal tormentor, had loved her mother. Her mother had loved him. The questions came in a flood, each one more painful than the last. What happened? Why did they break up? And the most terrifying question of all, the one that was now screaming in her mind, refusing to be silenced. Did he know about her? Was Carter Ellison, the monster from Table 7, her biological father? She felt a wave of nausea so profound she had to brace herself against the wall. She looked from the loving face of the young man in the locket to the cruel, dismissive face she saw twice a week. They were the same person. How could they be? She sank to the floor, surrounded by the ghosts of her mother's past. The hatred she felt for Carter Ellison was now tangled with a dizzying, sickening cocktail of confusion, betrayal, and a deep, aching grief for a story she never knew. Her life, which had felt small and difficult, had just fractured into a million incomprehensible pieces. And at the center of it all was the face of the man she had to serve in the morning. Sleep offered no escape. Bella's dreams were a feverish collage of images, her mother's smiling face melting into Carter Ellison's cold sneer, the engraved locket growing heavy in her hand, pulling her down into darkness, the sound of his voice saying, "Try a little harder," over and over again. She woke up feeling like she'd been run over, the harsh reality of her discovery settling in her bones like a permanent chill. He was her father. The words felt foreign, impossible. A father was meant to be a source of protection, of love, of identity. Carter Ellison was a source of humiliation and anxiety. The chasm between the man in Sophia's diary, the passionate, ambitious Al, who promised her the world, and the callous tycoon who critiqued her service, was too vast to comprehend. Her first instinct was to run, to quit her job, pack her bags, and disappear. Let him sit at Table 7 and torture someone else. But where would she go? Her financial situation was a razor's edge. Quitting without another job lined up was a luxury she couldn't afford. So she did the only thing she could. She went to work. The walk to the Gilded Spoon felt different. The city streets, the familiar faces, her own reflection in the shop windows, everything seemed alien. She was no longer just Aurora Templeton, struggling waitress. She was Aurora Templeton, the secret, unknown daughter of Carter Ellison. The thought was so absurd, it bordered on hysterical. When she walked into the restaurant, Liam greeted her with his usual cheerful smile. "Hey, you look like you've seen a ghost." "Worse," she mumbled, tying on her apron. It felt like a costume, a disguise. "I think I'm living with one." She couldn't tell him. The secret was too new, too monstrous. It felt like a fragile, throbbing wound. To speak it aloud would be to make it irrevocably real. For the first few hours, she moved through her shift in a daze. She refilled coffee cups, took orders, and cleared plates, but her mind was elsewhere, sifting through the contents of the box. She had stayed up half the night reading her mother's diary. The entries painted a vivid, heartbreaking picture. Sophia and Carter had met at a university library where she was shelving books part-time. He was a business student, consumed by his vision for a future empire. He was brilliant, driven, and back then utterly captivated by Sophia's warmth and spirit. He called her his anchor, the one who kept him grounded. But as his ambitions grew, a shadow fell over their romance. His focus shifted from them to him. The diary entries became tinged with sadness. March 4th. Carter was supposed to meet my friends tonight. He cancelled at the last minute for a networking event. He said, "These people matter, Sophia. This is the foundation." I wanted to ask him, "Don't I matter?" But I didn't. May 21st. We had a fight. A bad one. I said he was becoming cold, that his company was the only thing he truly loved. He told me I didn't understand the pressure he was under, that I was being sentimental. He didn't look at me when he said it. He looked at his business plan spread across the table. The final entry about him was stark and painful. June 15th. It's over. He said he needed to be ruthless to succeed, and that meant no distractions. He said he loved me, but that love was a luxury he couldn't afford right now. He is moving across the country to launch his first big venture. He didn't ask me to come. He didn't even leave the door open. He just left. He chose his dream over me. There was no mention of a pregnancy. Bella checked the dates. The breakup was in June. Her birthday was the following February. The timeline was undeniable. Sophia must have found out she was pregnant after he was already gone, and she had chosen to raise her daughter alone, never telling the man who broke her heart that he was a father. A wave of fierce, protective love for her mother washed over Bella. She pictured Sophia young and alone in a foreign country, choosing to face pregnancy and single motherhood rather than go back to a man who had called her a distraction. Her mother had shielded her from him, from his coldness, from his ambition. She had given Bella a life filled with love, even if it was also filled with struggle. The bell above the restaurant door chimed, and Bella's head snapped up. Carter Ellison walked in. Her heart hammered against her ribs. It wasn't just a rude customer anymore. It was him, her father, the man who had abandoned her mother. He took his seat at table 7, and one of the new hostesses, unaware of the unspoken rule, assigned the table to Bella. It was her section. There was no escaping it. Liam caught her eye, his expression sympathetic. "Want me to take it?" he mouthed. Bella shook her head. A strange, defiant resolve settled over her. She had to do this. She had to face him, armed with this terrible new knowledge. She walked to his table, her legs feeling unsteady. This time she wasn't just seeing a wealthy bully. She was seeing the man from the photographs. She searched his face for any trace of the young man her mother had loved. The piercing blue eyes were the same, but the light in them was gone, replaced by a glacial hardness. The sharp jawline was still there, but now it was set in a permanent mask of disapproval. "Good afternoon, sir," she said. Her voice was steady, but it cost her every ounce of control. He looked up, and for the first time, their eyes met and held for a fraction of a second longer than usual. Did he see something? A flicker of recognition? A ghost of Sophia in her features? No. His expression remained unchanged, cold, imperious. The usual, he said, already dismissing her to look out the window. As Bella walked away, she felt a profound sense of emptiness. She had half expected, or perhaps dreaded, some sort of sign, some spark of connection. There was nothing. To him she was still just the waitress, a faceless cog in the machinery of his day. The knowledge changed everything about the interaction. Every demand he made, every sigh of impatience, was no longer just the rudeness of a stranger. It was the neglect of a father. His complaint that his water wasn't cold enough felt like a personal rejection on a cosmic scale. When she brought him his steak, her hand was trembling. As she set the plate down, her thumb brushed against the warm ceramic edge. He recoiled slightly. "Please be careful," he said, his voice sharp with annoyance. "I don't particularly want your fingerprints on my plate." The word struck her with the force of a physical blow. Your fingerprints. Her fingerprints. The fingerprints of his own daughter. Something inside Bella snapped. The careful facade of the professional waitress cracked. She didn't lash out. She didn't cry. Instead, a chilling coldness settled over her, mirroring his own. She looked him directly in the eye. Her own hazel eyes, so much like her mother's, were flat and hard. "My apologies, sir," she said, her voice devoid of its usual forced warmth. It was clipped professional, but utterly hollow. She turned and walked away without another word. For the rest of his meal, she was a ghost. She did her job with icy efficiency, but she offered no smiles, no pleasantries. She refilled his water from a distance. She cleared his plates in silence. She was a presence, but she was no longer trying to please him. Carter noticed the change. She could feel his eyes on her as she moved through the dining room. His brow was furrowed in a slight frown. He was used to her trying to her, placating him. This new cold defiance was something different. It was something he wasn't controlling. It piqued his interest like a malfunctioning cog in a machine he expected to run perfectly. When he was done, she dropped the check on his table without a word. As he prepared to sign, he looked up at her one last time, a question in his cold blue eyes. Bella met his gaze and held it, her expression unreadable. For a moment, they were just two people, locked in a silent battle of wills, the vast unspoken history hanging between them like a curtain of glass. Then he looked away, signed the slip, and left. Bella walked over to the table, her heart a cold, heavy stone in her chest. She already knew what she would find, a 0 on the tip line. But this time she didn't care about the money. She was looking for the note. There was one, in the same sharp, angular script, an improvement. Silence is golden. Bella didn't crumble the receipt. She folded it neatly and put it in her apron pocket. It was evidence, another piece of the puzzle of who this man was. He preferred her silent and invisible. He had no idea how much of his own history he was trying to erase. The following weeks were a strange, tense dance. Bella continued her cold, efficient service, and Carter continued to watch her with a mixture of annoyance and curiosity. The dynamic had shifted. She no longer felt like a victim cowering before him. Armed with her secret, she felt powerful in a tragic sort of way. She knew who he was while he remained blissfully, cruelly ignorant. The knowledge was a shield. Her life outside the restaurant, however, was crumbling. The emotional toll of her discovery was immense. She spent her nights staring at the locket at her mother's diary, trying to reconcile the two Carters. Her graphic design work sat untouched. Her grief for her mother was now complicated by a fresh anger at the man who had caused her so much pain. Liam knew something was deeply wrong. "Bella, you have to talk to me," he pleaded one evening after a shift. "You're like a walking shadow. Is it about Ellison? Did he do something?" "He's always doing something," she deflected, unable to share the impossible truth. "I'm just tired of it." The breaking point came on a Tuesday in late autumn. The restaurant was unusually quiet. A young waiter, a nervous kid named Tom, who was only on his third shift, was assigned the section next to Bella's. By a stroke of bad luck, a large party cancelled, and the manager reseated Carter Ellison in Tom's section. Bella watched with a sense of impending doom as Tom, trembling slightly, approached the table. She could hear Ellison's clipped, demanding tone from across the room. She saw Tom's shoulders slump as he scurried back and forth, trying desperately to meet the impossible standards. The final straw was the soup. Ellison had ordered the butternut squash soup, a daily special. Tom delivered it, his hands shaking so much that a tiny drop sloshed onto the saucer. Ellison looked at the drop as if it were a venomous insect. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. His quiet, cutting tone was far more effective. "Tell me, young man," he said loud enough for the few nearby tables to hear, "is this your first time in a service environment, or are you simply incompetent by nature?" Tom turned beet red. I'm so sorry, sir. I can get you a new one." "A new one?" Ellison scoffed, pushing the bowl away. "The entire experience is now tainted by this sloppiness. It speaks to a lack of care, a lack of focus. If you cannot be trusted to carry a simple bowl of soup, how can you be trusted with anything of consequence?" Tom looked like he was about to burst into tears. "I'm sorry, sir," he stammered again, his voice cracking. The manager, Mr. Henderson, rushed over his face, a mask of panicked apology. "Mr. Ellison, my deepest apologies. Tom is new. It won't happen again." Ellison looked from Tom's humiliated face to Henderson's groveling one. "See that it doesn't," he said coldly. Then he added, "In fact, I don't want to see him again. His presence offends my sense of order." It was an execution, a quiet, brutal command. "Tre." Henderson, terrified of losing a wealthy if awful customer, simply nodded. "Tom," he said, turning to the boy, "my office. Now." And that was it. A young kid's livelihood destroyed over a drop of soup. Something in Bella, something that had been simmering for weeks, boiled over. The shield of her cold detachment shattered, replaced by a white-hot rage. It wasn't just about Tom. It was about her mother left behind for being a distraction. It was about her own life of struggle while this man sat on a throne of wealth built on the backs of people he deemed insignificant. It was about the casual, thoughtless cruelty of a man who had no idea the damage he inflicted, no idea that the waitress watching him was his own flesh and blood. She untied her apron and dropped it on a nearby service station. She walked directly to table 7. Mr. Henderson saw her coming. "Miss Templeton, what are you doing?" he hissed. Bella ignored him. She stood before Carter Ellison, her hands clenched into fists at her sides. He looked up at her, a flicker of surprise in his eyes. "Is there a problem?" he asked, his voice dripping with condescension. "Yes," Bella said, her voice shaking but clear and strong. "There is. You." Carter raised an eyebrow. The corner of his mouth twitched. He was almost amused. "I beg your pardon. You sit here day after day in your expensive suit, passing judgment on people who work harder in an hour than you likely have in your entire life." She began, her voice gaining strength. "You tear people down for sport. You just cost a kid his job because you have a pathological need to feel powerful. Does it make you feel big, Mr. Ellison? Does humiliating people who are just trying to get by fill some kind of black hole in your soul?" A hush had fallen over the dining room. Mr. Henderson looked like he was about to have a heart attack. Liam stared wide-eyed from across the room. Carter's amusement vanished, replaced by a dangerous calm. "I think you are forgetting your place, young lady." "No," Bella shot back, taking a step closer. "I think you've forgotten yours. You're just a man, a sad, lonely man who has to buy his sense of self-worth by belittling others. My mother taught me that a person's value isn't measured by their bank account. It's measured by their kindness, their compassion. By that measure, you are the poorest man I have ever met." The mention of her mother hung in the air, charged with a meaning only she understood. She saw a flicker of something in his eyes, not recognition, but confusion. The reference was too specific, too personal. It didn't fit the script of an insolent waitress. He stood up his full height, towering over her. But for the first time, Bella didn't feel small. She felt righteous. "You are fired," he said, his voice a low growl directed at Henderson, but with his eyes locked on Bella. "You can't fire me," Bella said with a bitter laugh. "I quit." She turned, not looking at Henderson's apoplectic face or Liam's stunned one. She walked straight to the staff room, grabbed her worn coat and her bag, which held her sketchbook and her dreams. She walked out the back door into the alley past the dumpsters and the discarded kitchen scraps and didn't look back. She was unemployed. She was terrified. But as the cool autumn air hit her face, she felt a profound sense of release. She had finally spoken. She had stood up to him, not as a waitress, but as a person, as Sophia Templeton's daughter. She had no idea that her final defiant words had planted a seed of doubt in Carter Ellison's mind, a seed that was about to grow into a truth that would shatter his carefully constructed world. Carter Ellison returned to his sterile, silent penthouse that evening, feeling unsettled. The girl's outburst was an anomaly, a disruption to the predictable order of his world. Employees and service staff were meant to be invisible, or at the very least, placidly obedient. He had been challenged, insulted, and berated in public by a common waitress. It was infuriating. Yet it was more than just anger. Her words echoed in the vast emptiness of his apartment. A sad, lonely man. The poorest man I have ever met. And the strangest part my mother taught me. Why would she bring her mother into it? It was an odd, intimate detail in an otherwise professional confrontation. And her eyes. There was a fire in them. He hadn't expected a defiant strength that was both infuriating and strangely familiar. He sat in his leather armchair, a glass of untouched scotch on the table beside him, and found he couldn't get her face out of his mind. The incident had left a crack in his composure. The next morning, his formidable executive assistant, Evelyn Hayes, entered his office with his daily schedule. Evelyn was a sharp, efficient woman in her 50s who had been with him for over a decade and was one of the few people who could tolerate his temperament. "Good morning, Mr. Ellison," she said, her tone crisp. "Evelyn," he began, forgoing his usual morning briefing. "I need you to find someone for me." She paused, tablet in hand. "A business acquisition?" "No," he said, turning to look out at the sprawling city below. "A person, a waitress. She worked at a restaurant called The Gilded Spoon." Evelyn's professional mask didn't slip, but he saw a flicker of surprise in her eyes. "A waitress, sir. May I ask the nature of this inquiry?" "She was insubordinate. I had her fired yesterday. I want to know who she is." He said the excuse sounding weak, even to his own ears. He didn't just want to know who she was. He needed to. The girl was a loose thread, and he could not abide loose threads. Her name, Evelyn asked. He hesitated. He had never once bothered to learn it. I don't know. Young, 20-something, dark hair, hazel eyes, fiery. Evelyn made a note. I'll contact the restaurant's management. It shouldn't be difficult. A few hours later, Evelyn returned. She stood silently before his desk, her expression carefully neutral. Well, he prompted, irritated by her silence. I have the information, sir, she said. The waitress's name is Aurora Templeton. Carter froze. The name hit him like a physical blow. Templeton. It was a common enough Italian name, but it was her name. Sophia's name. A name he hadn't heard spoken aloud in 25 years. A name he had buried under decades of work, wealth, and willful forgetting. His heart began to pound in his chest, a frantic, unfamiliar rhythm. What else? He asked, his voice strained. Evelyn seemed to sense the shift in the atmosphere. She's 25 years old. She has no living immediate family. Her mother, Sophia Templeton, passed away earlier this year from cancer. The world tilted on its axis. Sophia Templeton passed away. The two pieces of information slammed into him. Sophia was gone, and she had a daughter, a 25-year-old daughter named Aurora. He did the math in his head, his brilliant mind suddenly slow and clumsy. 25 years ago. It was the year he had left, the year he told Sophia that love was a luxury he couldn't afford. Sir, Evelyn asked, a rare note of concern in her voice. Mr. Ellison, are you all right? You're very pale. He couldn't breathe. The waitress. Aurora. Her defiant eyes. The mention of her mother. It wasn't a coincidence. It was a confrontation he hadn't even known was happening. My mother taught me that a person's value isn't measured by their bank account. It was Sophia's voice, coming from her daughter's mouth. He was her father. The girl he had tormented, insulted, and had fired from her job was his own daughter. The enormity of it was suffocating. The guilt was a physical thing, a crushing weight on his chest. All these years he had lived in ignorance building his empire, while Sophia raised their child alone, struggling. And then, at the end of her life, he had inadvertently stumbled back into their world, not as a long-lost father, but as a villain. Get me her address, he commanded, his voice hoarse. Sir, I'm not sure that's... Now, Evelyn! He thundered, his composure shattering completely. Evelyn, shaken quickly, found the information. Meanwhile, Bella was at her apartment, surrounded by packing boxes. She had called Liam and told him everything: the box, the diary, the fact that Ellison was her father. He had listened in stunned silence before rushing over, bringing pizza and a fierce, protective loyalty that made her cry with relief. So what now? He asked, sitting on the floor amidst the clutter. I don't know, she admitted, her voice small. I have enough saved for about 2 months' rent. I need to find a job, any job, and I need to get my portfolio finished. She looked at the locket which she now wore under her shirt. I need to figure out who I am now. A sharp, authoritative knock on the door made them both jump. Are you expecting someone? Liam asked. Bella shook her head. She wasn't. She peered through the peephole, and her blood ran cold. Carter Ellison stood in the dingy hallway of her apartment building, looking utterly out of place in his perfect suit. He looked older, more fragile than he did in the restaurant. He looked lost. Bella, who is it? Liam called. It's him, she whispered, her voice trembling. He's here. She stumbled back from the door as he knocked again, louder this time. Aurora Templeton, please, I need to speak with you. His voice was different. The arrogance was gone, replaced by a raw, pleading urgency. Liam stood up, ready to play the bouncer. "Do you want me to get rid of him?" Bella hesitated. Her mind was screaming at her to say yes, to tell him to leave and never come back. But her heart was a confused, treacherous thing. This was her father. This was the moment of truth crashing into her life with all the subtlety of a wrecking ball. "No," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "Let him in." She opened the door. Carter Ellison stood there, his blue eyes filled with a storm of emotions she couldn't decipher: guilt, regret, desperation. He looked at her, truly looked at her for the first time. He wasn't looking at a waitress. He was looking for a ghost. He was looking for Sophia. "You have her eyes." He breathed the words heavy with 25 years of regret. The dam inside Bella broke. The anger, the grief, the confusion, it all came pouring out. "My eyes," she said, her voice thick with unshed tears. "I have her strength too, the strength to survive without you. The strength she had when you left her, because she was a distraction." He flinched as if she had struck him. "I didn't know," he said, his voice ragged. "Sophia, she never told me. I swear to you, I never knew you existed." Would it have mattered? Bella shot back the hurt of a lifetime in her question. Or would I have been another distraction from your great ambition? "Yes," he said, his voice cracking with emotion. "God, yes, it would have mattered. It would have changed everything." He took a hesitant step into her apartment, his gaze falling on the open box on the floor, the diary, the photos. His eyes landed on the locket hanging around her neck. He reached into his own pocket and pulled out a worn leather wallet. From a hidden compartment, he produced a small object. It was a tarnished silver circle identical to hers, his half of the set. He had kept it all these years. The sight of it, more than any words he could say, undid her. It was tangible proof of the connection of the love story that had created her. "She told me you were gone," Bella whispered, the anger draining away, leaving only a vast, aching sadness. "She never said a bad word about you. She just erased you. To protect me, I think." "She was protecting you from me," Carter said, his gaze filled with self-loathing. "And she was right to. The man I became, the man who sat in that restaurant." He couldn't finish the sentence. He looked around at her small, humble apartment, at the evidence of a life lived without him, without his help, without his love. "What I did to you, what I said, Aurora, there are no words to express how sorry I am." The apology hung in the air, heavy and insufficient, but utterly sincere. Bella didn't know what to say. There was no manual for this, no guide for when your tormentor is revealed to be your father, standing in your living room, broken and begging for a forgiveness he didn't deserve, but so desperately needed. "I think you should go," she said, finally, her voice flat with exhaustion. He looked crushed, but he nodded. "I understand." He paused at the door. "Aurora, your mother. Sophia. She was the best part of my life, and I threw it away. I've regretted it every single day since." He turned and left the sound of his footsteps echoing down the hall until there was only silence. Bella sank onto the floor, the tears she had been holding back for weeks finally falling. Liam put a comforting arm around her. It wasn't a happy ending. It wasn't a reunion. It was a beginning, but the beginning of what she had no idea. It was just the wreckage of 2 lives finally laid bare. The silence left in Carter's wake was heavy and profound. He did not call or reappear. His first contact was a simple hand-delivered envelope a week later. Inside, a letter written in his sharp, familiar script offered no excuses, only stark accountability. Aurora, it read. The word sorry is meaningless for the pain I caused. I cannot undo the past. I only hope that one day you might allow me the chance to begin to try and earn your forgiveness. In my research, I found a review of a gallery showing from 26 years ago. Your mother's name is mentioned. She was a painter, too. A brilliant one. Tucked behind the letter was a faded newspaper clipping praising the vibrant work of an exciting newcomer, Sophia Templeton. Bella stared at it, tears blurring the words. Her mother had packed away her own artistic dreams. This small piece of her past was a gift only Carter could have given, not an apology, but an offering. It was the first stone in a fragile bridge. A few weeks later, another package arrived containing a professional graphics tablet. The note was brief. Talent should not be constrained by tools. This is not a gift. It is an investment in an artist I believe in. He was seeing her not just the ghost of her mother. He was investing in her future. With a mix of trepidation and curiosity, Bella agreed to meet him on neutral ground, a bench in the city's botanical garden. He arrived not in a suit, but in simple casual clothes, looking older and weathered by a regret that seemed to have settled deep in his bones. They didn't rehash the pain of the past. Instead, he asked about her art and her dreams. He shared stories of the passionate young woman he had loved, and she shared memories of the steadfast mother who had raised her. In that quiet garden, they began piecing together a complete picture of Sophia, the woman they had both loved and lost. For the first time, they weren't a millionaire and a waitress, but two people connected by a shared, profound grief. In the months that followed, Bella threw herself into her portfolio and earned a junior designer position at a small agency, a victory that was entirely her own. Carter began to make amends in his own way, quietly starting a charitable foundation in Sophia's name to support young female artists. Their relationship remained a work in progress, built not on grand declarations, but on small, quiet moments, a shared coffee, a walk through a museum, a respectful phone call. It wasn't the relationship Bella ever could have imagined, but it was real. They were two strangers bound by blood and tragedy, taking the first tentative steps on a long road toward each other, creating a fragile but hopeful new beginning. And so a story that began with cruelty and humiliation in a noisy restaurant finds its fragile peace in the quiet of a city garden. Bella and Carter's journey is a powerful reminder that our lives are not defined by the secrets we keep, but by what we do once those secrets are brought into the light. It proves that redemption isn't a single act, but a long, difficult road of trying to be better day by day. Their story is far from over, but for the first time, it's a story they are starting to write together. If this story of heartbreak discovery and the incredible power of forgiveness touched your heart, please let us know by hitting that like button. Share this video with someone who loves a story about the unbreakable bonds of family. And most importantly, subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss our next real-life drama. What would you have done in Bella's shoes? Let us know in the comments below.